Hey everyone, it's me again. Sorry that this video is a re-upload of two videos put together. Essentially, if you're seeing this, it means I'm not sure if I'm able to get a video out in time for the end of June, which is looking ever so more likely at the current moment of me recording this. I do have plans for a video in August that is not another tier list video, but I will share more about that closer to the date of recording it. But yeah, like I say, at the moment, getting a video out for June is seeming more and more unlikely. And the next tier list video is more original tier list video is more likely to come out in July, as opposed to now, or as when you're seeing this. So this is me being very brief, apologizing for that. Yeah, that's all I had to say. But if you are seeing this in time for June, know that I will be at Norwich Anime and Gaming Convention in cosplay. So if any of you are within that area, while I am also there, and you manage to spot me, do feel free to come up and say hello. I'm not hosting any panels, I'm just there as a normal convention goer. But if you do spot me and you want to say hello, have a chat about anything, do feel free to, but do tell me you know where you came from. Well, I know where you came from, just don't come up to me and say, hey, you'll flip the screen, right? Tell me you saw this video first so you know, because that's gonna be weird otherwise. But yeah, that's it. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking before this becomes a random rant. But yeah, hope you enjoy your day. Hope this bites the time over and feeds the YouTube algorithm. Star Wars: The Old Republic, an EA-published MMO developed by BioWare and maintained by Broadsword. For those of you who were around here during the first lockdown of the pandemic, you'll probably remember I shat out a lot of SWTOR videos for some reason. And that same group of you probably remember I came to the conclusion trying to make SWTOR content wasn't really fun for me. But while playing the game to make content on it wasn't fun, I still do have a lot of love for the game and its characters even today, as I do still play it in my free time. But given I just also beaten Knights of the Old Republic games as well, my love for this era of Star Wars has sort of been renewed in a way. And since I am a Star Wars fan, there's nothing I love more to do than share my opinions of Star Wars online when nobody asks me to. Oh, and if r/Soldier the creator watching, hi guys, hope you hate this. So here's my tier list ranking of all KOTOR and SWTOR companions. The tiers we have are as follows: S rank, A rank, B rank, C rank, and the KOF rank. You'll see why soon enough. Right, so to start from the beginning, we have the KOTOR companions to go off first. Carth. A loyal soldier of freedom until the end. Not that there's a problem with that. In the first KOTOR game, the first face you actually meet is Carth, and he sticks by you until the end of the game. As a character, his main arc revolves around getting the answers out of Careth, and while there is a criticism of him for not immediately revealing the player character is actually Revan upon finding out, his approach to it, at least in my opinion, isn't unreasonable. The one downside he really has on the surface is I'm not the biggest fan of his romance if you decide to play as a female Revan. But then again, when has romance dialogue in Star Wars ever been good? All in all, the first person you ever meet in this era, Carth's a good one. But I do think some later companions outshine him due to the fact they appear later on in KOTOR 2, and their impact 300 years later in SWTOR is more significantly felt. But he's still going in A tier because his story does conclude within the context of the original KOTOR. S tier, I don't think I need to elaborate. So, as far as Twi'lek main characters go, I like Mission, and her backstory is interesting while not being overly flashy. Helping Zane Carrick rescue kidnapped children from the future swoop gang leader Brejik, and by the time we meet her in-game, she's shown kindness towards the exiled Wookiee Zalbar. I understand there are people out there who don't like Mission on the part of her being an annoying child, but I just don't find that to be the case personally. Given the general tone of the game and how mature the story can get at times, Mission helps slightly to serve as bubbly contrast. Also, she's fucking 14 by the time the game starts, and she is helping to fight a space wizard empire along with several war criminals. This kid is a badass. B tier because I have a quota of bullying children to meet in this video. Zalbar's a big fucking teddy bear, but a loyal one at that, and I do appreciate having him around in a playthrough. His whole arc on Kashyyyk was fairly interesting as far as I'm concerned, but in being a big teddy bear, he has one notable flaw, in that not saying no to you is not easy for him. And to the point where the game reaches its final acts, you can straight up order him to kill Mission, the first person who ever showed him kindness after his exile. Though this will come back to bite you in the end if you choose to spare him following this order. I'd simply just have preferred a joint boss fight against Mission and Zalbar instead of a short-lived fight on the Star Forge later.
I am not stuck up.
Yes, you are! I think Basra is indeed a pompous prick, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't warm up to her over the course of my playthroughs. And I imagine that was probably part of the intention of Basra's character arc. She becomes more likeable over the course of the game, and I'd be lying if part of me didn't find her romance dialogue in the late game to be relatively sweet and heartwarming, even if the timing of her love confession is a little poorly timed given the context of the situation. A tier. Now, Canderous is where we start getting to the real meat of some of these opinions, mainly because Canderous' story stretches far beyond the confines of just the first KOTOR, as much like T3 and HK47, he returns in the sequel as Mandalore the Preserver, as well as his actions having a later effect in SWTOR nearly 300 years later. Canderous is witty, a veteran of the Mandalorian Wars, turned enforcer for Kalo Nord at the start of the game. And while the small arc he has throughout the first KOTOR game was minimal and satisfying, the Legends novel Revan really shines a spotlight on him, as he is the only one of the main companions of the original game who accompanied Revan in T7 on the journey to find out more about the true Sith. During this time we learn about Canderous' clan, Clan Ordo, one that lives on years later. Oh, and meets his wife. Which means Canderous did the one thing no SWTOR player will ever do and talk to a real woman. When he returns in KOTOR 2, while he does fall into Krea's manipulation, he still remains firm in his desire to reunite the Mandalorian clans like his predecessor Mandalore the Ultimate did. A tier because I am biased. So I know a lot of people are fans of Zerka's best assassin droid, and I am also one of them. HK as a character is pretty damn interesting, being a special assassin droid built by Revan himself to take out special targets. Now the HK series is a staple of the Zerka Corporation, but HK47 is unique, being the only non-Zerka HK droid. HK47 may not be the most powerful HK in the Old Republic games, I'd argue HK55 is deserving of that title, but what it lacks in power it makes up for in efficiency and longevity. For those of you who may played the base game content of SWTOR, you may also know what I mean by this. Bear in mind SWTOR takes place over 300 years after the events of Knights of the Old Republic 2. HK47 managed to survive all 300 years and still remain a formidable threat, as it appears in two flashpoints as sort of the midway boss fight in them, once in the Foundry and the next in the False Emperor. I will say I prefer the Foundry version of the fight to the False Emperor one, and there is one other thing that makes HK47 better than its two contemporaries from SWTOR, and that's something it says prior to the events of KOTOR. When Darth Malak asked the droid what he thought of him, HK47 responded by calling Malak a meatbag. Revan apparently found this so funny, he mandated all HK models to refer to organics as such. I'll put HK47 in A tier now purely because of how it's presented after the Foundry in SWTOR. Its next three appearances in the whole game don't really provide any gravity to the character who in the same game outlined its mathematical way of committing genocide at the behest of Revan. Juhani is actually fairly interesting for the brief time she happens to be relevant in the main story, being a Jedi Padawan who fell to the dark side at the peak of her trials, and her later conversations, should you manage to recruit her that is. But she doesn't really get much relevancy whether or not you're doing a light or dark side playthrough once you begin to reach the halfway point of the story, unless you choose to romance her. Speaking of which, she's also a lesbian character in early 2000s gaming, which is fairly cool if you ask me. C tier. I'll be honest, the same reasons I put Juhani in C tier can also be applied to Jolee. He's by far one of the better Jedi companions between both KOTOR games, but his lack of overall relevancy in the main story outside of when you meet him really really stops me from placing him higher, though his sense of humour is something I can certainly get behind. There are plenty of video essays on this website that deconstruct and analyse Kreia. I'd highly recommend these videos by Ansul Matul, as I think their two different perspectives are as equally valid as they are interesting. But to try and briefly give my thoughts on this character, given that giving my opinions is the whole point of these videos, Kreia to me embodies the core beats of KOTOR 2. In fact, given KOTOR 2's contrast to the original, Kreia does serve as the mouthpiece to the deconstruction of Star Wars that the game presents. You are allowed to see that as Preachy, the lead writer for this game, is not exactly a flawless man. Elements of her can be seen in a couple of other characters in modern Star Wars, namely Luke from The Last Jedi and Baylan Skoll from the Ahsoka show, with both being disillusioned with the Jedi Order as a whole and deciding it ought to remain a relic of the past, though Baylan takes a much more destructive path as a result of that belief, which is more akin to Kreia. Whether or not these two characterizations were inspired by Kreia or just so happen to be coincidences can be up to interpretation unless Johnson or Filoni explicitly state otherwise. Either way, without turning this segment into a video essay of its own, trust me, I have a full video about KOTOR's relevance to modern Star Wars planned for the future. Kreia is an important character who plays her role in the deconstructive narrative of the game extremely well, and it's hard for me not to appreciate a character, especially with the level of voice acting quality that you get for her. I could say a lot of things about Atton, both negative, positive, and downright childish, but for time's sake I'll try and make this briefer than the previous bit. So Atton's story is interesting to me, but I feel like it misses a few key story beats that could have been further expanded on, though I imagine this is the result of the final product of KOTOR 2 being absolutely gutted content-wise. The restored mod does help Atton's story, in fact it helps everyone's stories a bit. The canonicity of it is debatable, and even then the mod doesn't fully restore all lost content. So... Right, now back to Atton. I do genuinely believe Atton's background and story is interesting, although the whole killing the Jedi that showed him the Force out of love thing isn't good writing as it tries too hard to make him sympathetic. And Atton is sympathetic, but that one detail pushes the line from wow I feel bad for him and see why he is the way he is now to Lamau this guy is fucking cringe, though albeit for a game Atton is genuinely quite fun to have around and his personality helps contrast Kreia really well, which trust me it's needed because otherwise this game would be way worse if there was never any contrast to Kreia. So thank you Atton. There's something else about Atton I didn't mention is... Wait, we're on Bodo now? I've got Jag Diddley Scott written from that isn't a synopsis of what the mass shadow generator is. Alright, no problem. I can improvise. Okay, that is being a bit harsh on Bodo, as out of everything that not even the restored content mod team were able to do, Bodo is not given nearly as much screen time as he deserves. Who he is, his relationship to the player, and what he's doing when you meet him are, and I cannot stress this enough, massively important to not only the game's narrative and background, but also that of KOTOR 1 and even SWTOR, a game which happens 300 years after this one. I said last time that Juhani and Jolie Bindo didn't get enough screen time despite their interesting stories. Well, at least we kind of get to hear those stories, even if they aren't explored for any gameplay or main plot elements after they become companions. But holy fuck, saying Bodo somehow got the shorter end of the same short stick is a massive understatement. Now, I really do like Bodo. The interactions you get with him are genuinely interesting, and you can really tell he's a man who regrets his actions and is willing to do whatever he can to atone for his sins in the Mandalorian Wars. Also, his remote is a brave little droid, so at least he's not lost everything to the game's cut content. A tier purely because what we have left of Bodo's original content is genuinely brilliant. I get a lot of feeling people don't actually like Brianna. Hell, I know someone who downright hates her. I, however, don't really have much of a major opinion on Brianna, though I will give her endgame character arc when she finally reveals her name to the player and standing her ground against her sisters, big props. Most of Brianna's development only occurs in dialogue with her on the Ebon Hawk, and very little in the main game and provides her with much to say. In fact, she tends to focus mainly on Atris and the player's relationship. However you choose to view that relationship and Atris' choice of telling Brianna specifically to become your companion can be up to interpretation, and I tend to lean back and forth on whether said relationship is romantic or platonic. But despite Brianna's development only happening in pure dialogue scenes, the screen time she gets in the game's final act really gives her a chance to shine.
I hope your thoughts in this matter are clear. In saving her, you may destroy yourself. And do not mate with her. Whatever you may feel, whatever urges consume you, do not let them control you. Such a union would breed difficulties. We shall see.
Oh, fine, I'll get on with the banking. So, Thesis. Yeah, I feel like she's a pretty good character. What, you wanted more than that? Okay, I'll do this properly. Okay, Visas, in my opinion, is a slightly better version of Brianna. Regardless of how you view the relationship the Exile can have with any one of their companions, there's a pretty strong argument to be made that Visas is in love with the Exile regardless of their gender. There are 3 scenes in Visas' stories we see in-game that stick out to me personally. The main one being her introduction to the Exile. When I first played KOTOR 2, I wasn't familiar with Visas' character. I knew she was in the game and that she was a Miraluka, but I knew nothing of her character or story. When she introduces herself to the Exile, I immediately wanted to know more about her. And luckily, her story isn't all that gutted by the cut content, and I remember finding myself really emotionally invested in her story. Unfortunately, Visas does have her flaws, specifically with her dialogue. And one of the other key scenes that sticks out to me, which is one a lot of people consider to be emotion porn, whether intentional or not, a lot of Visas' dialogue was uncomfortable to sit through at points, and this emotion porn scene still felt out of the blue given her character progression up until this point. So I imagine she wasn't even immune to the cut content of the game. No, I do not like you. Look, I know I've gone on and on about cut content really gutting a lot of characters in this game, but Goto has nothing that makes me interested in it. There's an interesting premise behind the character, but there really is just no meat to the character if you ask me. And I sometimes forget he's even in the game. I'm sorry Goto, but you've got the privilege of being the first one to go in the KOTOR tier. Mira is a character in the middle ground for me. Like all other companions featured in the game, she's got an interesting backstory, though luckily the important parts of her character arc managed to remain fully intact by the looks of things. I definitely wouldn't say I find Mira uninteresting. In fact, her more cheery personality is very much appreciated when you consider the generally dark tone of the game and tragedy surrounding everyone in it, including her. Her story feels like a very said and done thing to me, and she doesn't have any major moments or qualities that make her stand out overall. Now, originally when I was writing this script for this video, I found a ranked list of the KOTOR 2 companions on GameRant. Now, I could make a valid critique of Hanha. I dislike the way the article portrayed him so much, I'm putting in an A tier just to be spiteful. So, Mikhail's the inverse of Brianna, given without any content restoration mods, Mikhail is exclusive to the female Exile. I know I'm probably repeating something everyone who's played a female Exile has said, but Mikhail is a precious being. I really can't help but like this guy. His backstory, while not as interesting or in-depth as many of the other companions in-game, hell, even though he's functionally Brianna's counterpart, he perhaps doesn't have as deep as a character as she does. But he's just so goddamn lovable.